From Carolla One Studios in Glendale, California, this is the Adam Carolla Show. Adam's guest today, the president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center, Bjorn Lomborg. With Gina Grad on news, Paul Bryan on sound effects, Eric Stromer drops by, and Dave Damashek is here for good sports. And now, due to racism concerns, he'll no longer be masturbating. He will be primary baiting. Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. No choice but to get on. Mandate. Get it on. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for telling a friend. We love that about you. Good day, Gina Grad.
Good day to you.
Handball, Brian.
I spent years on my hands and knees.
That's Stromer. We'll join him, and he'll join us in a second, do a little home improvement talk. Some interesting stuff to share with y'all. Little Love Boat ditty. Max Zapata, sorry, something I should have said off the air. I just remembered. The story of the indigenous people, the American Indians, and their ability to work on skyscrapers.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
That
Yeah, you've
story.
talked
It's
about
a
that.
very interesting story, and which tribe that was and how it worked. Somehow they did not have whatever gripping fear the paleface has when you step out onto a high beam. Yes.
I remember this, and I remember we were splitting hairs because we couldn't really figure out, and I know it's almost two versions of the same thing, but do they not possess the fear in their blood, or are they so manly and macho that they have the natural fear of heights, but they just overcome it and they just do it anyway?
That's a very spot question.
I found out the answer. They'd researched it. They found out they were drunk. And
I can't imagine that's the finding.
that's
that
what
so.
it was in JAMA, or I can't remember which. It was one. It was pretty New England medicine. It was one
Controversial,
it was pretty,
to say the least.
Well, it wasn't my study. I didn't commission
It's
it.
counterintuitive.
I just remember reading it.
No, Gene, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So the reason I'm thinking of that, and I'll circle back to that, but Max Zapata will find out the tribe or the story. But it's an interesting story about that group. It's sort of like code talkers, wind talkers. There was a movie that they would do for World War II where they would break the code, or the Germans didn't, or the Japanese didn't understand their language. So it was a contribution. It was interesting. One of the things that I noticed when I went to Amazon and I was looking at the top 100 books, and I realized that the top 100 books, I didn't go all the way through it, but I just sort of looked at the top 6. That's the kind of the ones that pop up on the page as the top 6. And I thought, this is a perfect time we're living in. Because
That's good.
now,
Oh my God.
I've said to everyone, they go, Adam, what's the future? What's the future? I go, safe spaces and octagons. That's where we're going. Half the country's going to a safe space, the other's going to the octagon. Out of the top 6, and that's just what comes up on the page, it's, Donald Trump, We Hardly Knew You, the one written by his niece.
Too much and never enough.
There's White Fragility, and there's, I can't read it from here, but go, if you can read it, do it.
Yeah.
Number one is
Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the Most Dangerous Man, the Donald Trump book by Mary L. Trump. Out of these 6, I own 2 of them, by the way. The next one, My First Learn to Write workbook.
ABC 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
ABC 1, 2, 3. I mean, a book for 4-year-olds.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
School Zone, big preschool workbook, ages 4 and up.
Right,
The big
and these are
preschool
big
workbook.
pictures of caterpillars and
yeah.
flowers, and these are kids. These are young kids' books. So that's 1, 2, and 3. 4.
White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism.
5.
How to Be Anti-Racist. 6, Paint by Sticker for kids.
With a unicorn on the
and
front.
magic.
A pink unicorn.
I have both those preschool books.
Now
Christy literally just got one of these workbooks for Tessa, literally in the last 24 hours.
Both of those 2 and 3.
obviously, when I published my first book 10 years ago, it was some autobiographies and spy thrillers. That was the whole whole thing. Maybe the one cookbook would pop up there on occasion. We are now just kids' books and white fragility, Trump, whatever. I mean, there is no middle anymore. It's
kids' workbooks and the world is shit.
Right. That's where we're at.
It's an e-commerce safe space.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? When you see it, it's literally 3 and 3 in the top 6 of Amazon, which
that's a funny visual.
Pretty much the top 6 in the world, right? So then I started thinking I'd been watching The Love Boat just to see if I can reclaim some of my dignity, and Drew and I now hooked on The Love Boat, and I had this thing about the 70s and even the 80s where there was a whole bunch of people that couldn't sing who did sing. It was like that Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore. They'd do all these daytime TV shows and they'd sing a song. George Burns.
It was compulsory. We talked about this. If you were a star, you had to sing.
Right. Ginger Rogers. Yes, Ginger Rogers. Now, the thing about The Love Boat is it was essentially a Viking funeral for celebrities from the 40s and 50s. Like all these big name, huge name.
To see.
Yes, literally. Like they should have just fired an arrow filled with kerosene rags and caught on fire, because major names, heavy hitters from Broadway, from the 50s, leading men, leading women, they would just end up on The Love Boat. And it's some of their last credits before they died was on The Love Boat. There's Ginger Rogers was born in 1911, died in 1995, 83 years of age, married and divorced 5 times, best actress in 1940, raised in Kansas City. I remember seeing that, not quite the same as Gina, but close enough. She was it's Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, right? I mean, they're the toast of the town.
The famous quote that whatever Fred Astaire did, Ginger Rogers did backwards and in heels.
Right. And they also had, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was on this episode. I mean, they would have these big names from the golden era of Hollywood, and then it would just end up in bad tuxedos and bad hair and bad whatever. Anyway, 1979, and Ginger Rogers is going to sing a number. The captain has convinced, because that was always the storyline would be, oh, you're the biggest star in the world. They weren't Ginger Rogers. They were a fictitious right. Ginger Rogers. But would you honor us with a number? And it'd be like, okay.
Jasmine Richards.
Yes. And so I'm just going to play this for you. It's visual, but it's also audible, and you got to hear it, and you got to watch the backup singers, and you got to remember where she comes from, because she was a mega star in the 40s, probably late 30s, early 40s, and here's where she ends up on The Love Boat, singing a Captain and Tennille song. And when I say singing, I use that term loosely. All right, here we go.
She's not known for that.
Oh, she's still not after this. Love will keep us together.
Oh my.
Think of me whenever. Some sweet talking.
This is not nice.
I don't hate this.
This is not dignified.
I love this.
Be strong, just stop. 'Cause I really love you. Stop. I'll be thinking of you. Look in my heart and let love keep us together.
Oh no.
You belong to me now. Ain't gonna set you free now.
You guys got to go to YouTube and watch this.
Run, don't walk.
Here with your heart, and you won't hear a sound. Just stop. 'Cause I really love you. Stop.
The visual's captivating.
Yes.
The dudes in the background are like Momenchance.
Yeah, she's barely moving, and the guys behind her put in some work.
Ooh, high kick.
Young and beautiful, but someday your looks will be gone. When the others turn you off, who'll be turning you on? I will.
All right. The
Captain
most
Stewart.
acting anyone ever does is looking entertained in the audience when the washed up singer dancer has to butcher a Captain and Tennille song. So
That wasn't
sad.
great.
It's
That was not
rough.
a dignified coda to her career.
I know, but that's why you have to watch Love Boat, because all these recognizable names, because the last thing is, it's a theme we've touched on a few times. No one wants to be called old or out of it. And you were, when was Ginger Rogers at the height of her powers? 39?
Yeah, 40.
Yeah.
That's when she won Best Actress, so that's usually...
But for dancing, her and Fred Astaire, 1940. All right. This is 39 years later, right?
Oh, boy.
And now it's time to... And I'm sure their agents are going, everyone's doing it, man. It's a top 5 show. It's the number 1 show on ABC. Show up and do it. Yep. They had their 10 films from 33 to 39. Right.
Oh, she worked.
Oh, man. That's right. Probably fucking died penniless. Either way, yes.
When you mentioned that era of Hollywood where if you were a star, you had to sing. At some point, you just had to sing, whether you could or not. It reminds me of one that we're all familiar with, one we've all heard and seen before. You remember the Frosty the Snowman special from 1969?
Do I ever?
The iconic TV, movie that comes
Stop
out.
Start.
Burl Lives.
That is Rudolph. Frosty is narrated by Jimmy Durante, Jimmy
right,
Durante.
right,
Jimmy
right.
Durante. And he sings, unbeknownst to anyone why, he sings. Do we have a clip of that? I told Chris about it. Hopefully he can find it. Frosty the Snowman.
Right.
Was a jolly happy soul with a corn-cob pipe and a button nose and 2 eyes made out of coal.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Durante, great, iconic, mobster and whatever. This is not his forte.
No, but you had to sing, and sadly, you had to dance a little bit too. Even if you didn't dance and you didn't sing, you just had to. It was a holdover from vaudeville, right? It was just like, come on, you got to do a little soft shoe. That's what you
variety
do.
hour.
Like, just go out there and do a little bit of dancing. All right, could you imagine if, like, I don't know, they did that in Oz or Breaking Bad or something like that, where it's just like a little bit of dancing, there's a little bit of singing. All right, we got Stromer, who's joining us, the great Eric Stromer, going to talk a little home improvement with him. I know he's got a few. I think we got a few questions in Dawson as well. Stromer, what's going on?
I was just riveted by that dance number, and I can't help but imagine you, me, Bald Brian, and of course Max Zapata back up dancing to Gina.
Oh, I love
With
that.
those onesies. Come on.
Yeah.
The-
Love will keep
There it
us
is.
together.
And then we're doing the
The elbows.
didn't your dad own a dance academy?
My dad was a ballroom dance teacher for kids, 7th and 8th grade kids. So I grew up doing foxtrot box step business and really do know how to do it. But, I don't use it much except weddings. But at weddings, I'm flawless.
Adam talks about how there really are no more Renaissance man. I hereby disagree.
I would have to agree with you, Gina Grad.
This is
Thank you.
incredible.
Stromer, Stromer comes
I
from
can do a lot. I can do a lot of stuff fairly good.
Stromer has a very interesting pedigree. A lot of song, a lot of dance. I think we know what his dad did. I think his mom was an artist.
Yeah, she
Right.
was an artist, and she helped my dad with the business. And that that line that you said, Gina Grad, doing the dancing backwards in heels, that Fred Astaire thing, that was kind of her life. She did everything with my dad, and they were partners and great at it.
Jesus, I hate my parents so
What a
much.
world.
Oh, I am beginning to hate him too.
Good,
after all,
good.
I can't stand the old man with the trumpet. Fuck that guy.
I know. So Stromer's a Renaissance guy. Then
I
Stromer,
believe it's pronounced Renaissance.
Renaissance.
René.
Wow. He even
And
speaks French.
he does, and then he got into building, and then he got into TV. He was really, honestly, he was just too good looking to build. He could not. I don't know, like a waitress working in Hollywood or Beverly Hills that was just too good looking. Like eventually some producer was going to wander into that place and pluck her up. So,
I like how you refer to you're using the the right pronoun of her describing me.
Now Stromer has been all through the TV mill. People may
Chew it up and spit out.
We did the Top Gear USA pilot together many years ago. You know, it's actually a funny story that we haven't told in a while, but when we're in Prump and we're eating steak and you were dying next to me.
Yeah, so I want everyone to know that Adam Carolla saved my life.
Do tell.
And I was, we were all sitting in front of the executives having that big dinner, the night before production's about to begin. Everybody's feeling each other out. Of course, Adam and I order big pieces of steak. Where, Adam's dining, listening, looking around like he does with his perception, his laser perception. And all of a sudden I realize I've got a big hunk of steak stuck in my throat and I'm about to die. And I don't know if I should do the international point to my throat sign or not, but I'm embarrassed to do that. But I can't breathe and I can't get the thing out. And Adam just kind of looks at me and he just keeps eating and just looks at me and waits until maybe I die or not. And I think he would have helped me.
I knew no one at the table knew Stromer was choking but him and me.
Exactly. Our eyes locked.
He knew. Like the producer's like at the end of the table with a glass of wine telling a story about, working on Air Bud 3 or something, and everyone's kind of looking at him. And I'm looking at Stromer, and Stromer's choking. But I don't want to get up and scream, is there a doctor in the house, or perform the Heimlich, because it may pass. Like he may clear it, or he may clear it.
He may die. And I got somebody I can call to replace him tomorrow.
You just didn't give one of those attaboy back slaps and have it come flying out.
We were sitting at a table with a bunch of highfalutin producers and stuff, and I knew it would be embarrassing if I stood up and yelled Stromer's choking and everyone looked at him. So I just kept looking at him while the producer at the other end was holding court, and I could see he wasn't breathing. I could see it wasn't going down right. But I was going to give it another 5 Mississippi before I made my move. And he was just sitting there turning different colors and not talking. And at a certain point, I saw him clear it. I saw him clear it. And I thought, well, good. Thank God I didn't get up and make an ass out of Stromer.
Yeah, and we never spoke of it again until always on air when we talk about me.
I was looking out for you by not looking out for you. Is what I'm saying.
I think you don't want to draw attention. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And if I had died, I know you would have told my wife nice things.
Yes. All I remember is, I don't know if anyone's been to Pahrump. If you've ever been to Pahrump, when you're in Vegas and you see those weird off the strip hotels, and it's like $2 ante and blackjack, or 2 hour one nickel slots, or when you drive past that place, you go, God, that's sad. Like, what's going on in there? That's so sad. Pahrump is 3 or 4 notches down from that.
And
the name really says it all.
Right.
It really does. It's Pahrump. And
right.
Doesn't it I think there's a winery there that has maybe the world's worst wine, but I'm not sure. Wasn't that it, Adam? We were at a winery.
We ate at a vineyard.
A vineyard, that's it.
Stromer, give me the sad Pahrump again.
Pahrump. Yeah, exactly.
All you need to know is that's where Heidi Fleiss raises macaws. She's there with 1,000 parrots. So, all right. This segment is brought to you by JB Weld. I should tell you guys, and I should also tell you guys, they got me a killer JB Weld jacket. Did you get your jacket, Stromer? This thing is no joke.
It is, and it's got the great insulation. My daughter commandeered it, and she won't let me have it back.
Eddie Bauer, by the way, they ain't skimping, so I wear mine whenever it rains. We got some questions up there, Maxipata.
Yeah, so Martin in South St. Louis says, "Hey, Ace and Stromer. My house was built in 1902 with an old style of gutter. We'll put up pictures. It looks like the previous owners tried to patch some holes with some kind of Flex Seal, and it really didn't hold. Now the water has made it through and is rotting the fascia. Any idea how I'd go about fixing this or what to even tell a gutter guy?"
Gutter guy. You know, the gutter guy will show up in his gutter guy truck, and he'll bend that stuff up and mix that stuff up and shape that stuff right there. Oh, you're talking about gutter, not, wait a minute. You said gutter and fascia, right?
Like
I'm thinking fascia on a house. What is that? That's a curb.
That picture shouldn't have been first, but that is from the roof. So you're looking at the gutter. It's confusing because there's a sidewalk right there and it's not dimensional. This other picture will go up and it'll make more sense.
Gotcha.
All right.
Oh, sure. The old rotting fascia.
The old rotting fascia.
And it's right at a seam, coincidentally. I wonder why it's leaking.
Yeah. So here's the thing about gutters. You can buy prefab stuff in lengths and put it up yourself, sort of Home Depot variety, or you can have the gutter guy show up and he's got the nibblers and the breaks and the bends and he'll actually just make it on site. Stromer, you must have worked with these guys before, right?
Yeah, and in this case, because it's so much farting around with trying to repair a bad gutter, I would recommend removing it, have the gutter guy come bend a new one in for you. And then as far as the fascia goes, you can cut that piece. There's usually framing at the end of the rafters that you attach the fascia to. I would just cut it at one of the rafters, piece in a new piece, bond to it, and put some nice coat of paint on it, match it up, you'll be fine. And I also think that probably was backflowing at some point. It always looks to me when fascia is rotting out that you're not cleaning your gutters out thoroughly, so they back up when it rains or there's a snow melt in the spring, and water just keeps sitting on the face of that fascia and starts to rot out on you.
I got to tell you,
clean
man.
the gutters, everybody. Clean them.
Yeah, but get the neighbor kid to do it, man. Everybody I know who's got a dad has eaten shit on a ladder up trying to get the gutters. And I mean, a lot of guys die that way.
Yeah, the Widowmaker, they call it.
They do. I remember talking Joel McHale's dad was doing that. He shattered his pelvis and stuff like it. Yep. It all kind of seems like a joke until you fall off 8-9 feet and land halfway onto a potted plant.
Right. Dad broke his ribs falling off a ladder. Just slipped right under him.
Artie Lang's dad fell off a roof and was paraplegic, I think.
Yeah, he was installing an antenna and broke his back.
And installing a pair. So let the young kids do that. Or what is the American Indian tribe that has no difficulty
the Mohawks.
We're the Mohawks?
Right?
I guess, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the Mohawk. Bring the Mohawks in to at least hold the ladder.
That's right.
Getting the repair done.
That's right. All right, what else you got there, Dawson?
JJ asks, my central air unit is on the opposite side of the condo, so pressure for the AC is AC or heat is very weak. The filter is clean. What's an easy solution?
Pressure weak. Filter clean. It's traveling too far.
So the ducting is it's losing compression in the duct and not getting to the room. So sometimes a lot of times they don't do solid ducting. They do the corrugated stuff because it's an addition.
You mean like the flex stuff? The
flex duct. There's even a less. A worse version of it where it is flex, but it's I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't work well and it doesn't transition air from point A to point B. So either A, you get a secondary air conditioner, run a new duct somewhere else, get a window unit, get a swamp cooler, or you get new ducting to get that air transferring through the smooth line duct much more efficiently.
Well, I will tell you that if anyone ever goes up in an attic and crawls around and looks at your ducting, the flexible stuff or the non-flexible stuff, that duct tape is what it was meant for. Over the course of the years, when it heat cycles, like it gets 125 degrees up in your attic, and then it cools and gets really cool during the winter time, and then it gets super hot, that tape gets like crispy. Like it literally loses all its flexibility. And you go up there and you fire up the air conditioner and you go up in the attic or under the house or wherever it is, and you can feel that cold air like just pouring out through the seams. If you have a rigid like sheet metal ducting, they make a kind of a silver salve. It's like a rubberized silver kind of paint that you'd put over all the seams. But of course, that stuff dries out. You have to understand, cycling is what screws everything up. Like, remember when everyone's dashboard would get all cracked in their car because it gets so hot, and then you'd get in and you turn the air conditioning on, and then it would cool off, and then you'd leave it and it would get hot again, and then you'd park it in the garage and it would cool off again. Cycling from hot to cold screws everything up. Like it screws up the integrity of everything. So like, get your duct tape, also get your metal flex tape. They have metal tape. You can take the metal tape and wrap the metal tape around the seams, whether it's rigid or not. But do that. And then also, you know, we talked about like the window mount air conditioning unit and blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of nice, compact, low profile, like Mitsubishi wall mount units that are heaters and air conditioners. And if you're like a part of your house that's always cold or always hot, and it's like on the other side of the whatever, and the air conditioning's not doing a good enough job, get a little one of these. Mitsubishi makes them. There's other companies that make them where they're just little wall mount units, and they work with a remote control, and they work well.
Yeah, and they also have their own compressor. And I just actually did that for a client, and you know, the run was too long. And if you install one of those and then just cut that duct or block the vent, and then pressure all of a sudden shows up in the rest of the house. And then to your point, you know, the attic is a really aggressive environment. So a lot of times too, people forget to insulate in there. And if you are going up to examine the ducts, and if there are leaks, make sure you take a moment to see if the attic itself is insulated at least. Because, you know, if you cool the attic down with a whole house fan maybe, or at least some vents, that air conditioner has more of a chance to have the poor ducting work a little better. You'd ideally want insulated ducting, but if you don't have it, at least get the attic itself a little cooler by flushing that air out.
That whole house vent fan is a good call. I mean, Brian, you could probably use one. You just put it right in the middle of the house during the summer, crack a window, fire that thing up, and all the air. It's good when you're cooking or something too, and the whole house smells like sardines or something. It just sucks it all out, spits it up into the attic. All right, those questions were brought to you by our friends over at JB Weld. Everyone, DIY projects to get through. Want to save some money? Want to avoid paying the repairman? Dawson just fixed his computer with JB Weld. I think his screen
started popping out on my Surface Pro, so I got a couple of clamps and a little bit of JB Weld and a wet towel. Sealed it right up. It's working perfect.
Owner doing it for himself. Big or small projects, home or garage, ordinary household glue. Well, it's just ordinary. It ain't strong. You need JB Weld. Proud to have him as a sponsor. I know the owner. He's a good guy, and I know the company, and they're good. I hung out with them over at SEMA. They've been around for over 50 years, and it's all made in the USA. So toolbox, kitchen drawer, craft room, whatever. Wood, plastic, metal, and more. JB Weld it. Available at jbweld.com, Home Depot, Lowe's, AutoZone, Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly, Walmart, Michaels, and more. Stromer, you can find him when we do Ace on the House, new episodes every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podcast One. And shoot him a tweet at Eric Stromer as well. Am I missing anything, Stromer?
No, that's it. You got me. Come find me.
Come find Stromer. And how's your son? People may not know that Stromer's son is a blue chip basketball prospect.
Yeah, he's a 6'6" point guard freshman, got a bunch of offers already to play D1 basketball. The downside, this is what's going on out there, which is really terrible. They want to kind of take back control of the city and not have the stuff spread around. But a lot of kids are breaking rules and sneaking into gyms and scrimmaging without masks on. And it just seems like the petri dish from hell, right? So it's tough now for an athlete who's trying to continue training when there's no access to any place to train unless you sneak in and break the rules. So that's where we are right now. It's kind of tough.
But he's going to go to a D1 school.
Stromer got at least one paid for so far. I had to pay retail on the first one, but second one, no dice, ain't gonna happen. Third one, if she pays, I'm gonna shoot myself or light myself on fire. Can't do it.
I wonder if my son can get a scholarship for watching your son playing basketball and tweeting about it. Is there something for that?
Yes, there is. That's called a manager at CAA representing athletes, and he'll end up making millions of dollars a year. So, yes, there is something.
Thank you, Stromer. We'll take a quick break. We'll come right back with the news right after this.
Give me the news with Grad. News with Gina Grad. Breaking viral, all those crazy Trump tweets. Give me news with Gina Grad. Trouble in the Middle East. Celebrity drunk meltdowns. Need news with Gina Grad.
The news with Gina Grad.
Well, since we were just talking about basketball a few moments ago, let's start with some basketball news. It seems like some NBA players are taking coronavirus precautions very seriously in Orlando, at least some more than others, or they're taking snitching seriously. According to theathletic.com, there have been multiple calls to a hotline the NBA set up to anonymously report social distancing violations in the little NBA bubble at Walt Disney World that they set up, where 22 teams are currently preparing to restart the season on July 31st. While inside this little campus, players are not allowed to visit each other's hotel rooms, but they can socialize under, strict restrictions. And according to The Ringer, after teams arrived last week, players were immediately quarantined in their hotel rooms for 36 to 48 hours until they test negative for coronavirus. But they are snitching on each other. Sometimes it's a prank, sometimes it's not. And a lot of people are choosing not to even go at all now.
Prank.
But don't they have to practice together? Like, aren't they out on the floor together?
They're going to have to be, but they have to be COVID negative for 36 to 48 hours. So it's very strict.
Quietly, basketball, much more a contact sport than football. I don't
Absolutely.
mean tackling, of course. I just mean posting up and defending and touching. As like linemen, of course, Adam, they're all over each other. But how often is a receiver all over a DB? Like, I mean, 3, 4, 5 times a game. The basketball, it's a sweaty pit.
Yes, and you're
and
backing
it's also indoors.
It's a constant positioning and backing in. I mean, it's like it's a prolonged contact. Number one. Interesting. The community doesn't do a lot of snitching when it comes to the kid getting shot in the drive-by, but when it comes to the Disney Corona thing, they're running for the phone. I find that curious. Culturally
How long
curious.
Until someone pulls that on a playoff opponent? You know what I mean? Like, hey, I heard LeBron. You didn't hear from me, but LeBron's got the Corona. Anyway, I know it's Game 7 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you think of these young guys and, they're what, millionaires, and they're what, in their early 20s, and they're not trying to sit around in their rooms all day. So, I would imagine they're trying to sneak out for a little while.
Look, the whole thing about sports is there's constantly been curfews and sneaking out. Famously, you set the curfew and then everyone goes out. I mean, when they would have the Super Bowl in New Orleans, everyone would sneak out on Saturday night and get drunk. I mean, there's famous stories. I think one of the most famous stories is, I can't recall his name, but the wide receiver for the Colts. No, well, there's that too. But the Colts wide receiver, and Max Zapata can maybe find this, Super Bowl III or whatever it is. The Colts won, but 4-2, or maybe it was Super Bowl I. Yeah, Don Maynard Don Maynard was like, this is back when guys would smoke in the locker room, and he wasn't slated to start, I don't think, and he went out and just stayed out all night drinking. And
I think it was a Packers receiver. I know the story.
Maybe it was the Packers. Maybe it was the Packers.
He wasn't supposed to play, and he ended up having a great game or something. He was like hungover.
Yeah, it was either it was the Packers maybe playing the Colts or something. He wasn't slated to start. We were in Los Angeles. The guy's from Wisconsin, you know what I mean? He's in Green Bay. Now he's in Los Angeles, and he's just out drinking and smoking all night. Shows up, green and hungover the next day, and turns out the guy who was starting in front of him pulled a hammy, and he's in. And then has a spectacular game. So kids, if you're listening, understand that copious amounts of alcohol and nicotine the night before the big game is what gets you that Lombardi.
Yeah, so it makes you great.
Yeah, the
breakfast of champions.
What I was trying to connect was, and you guys tell me, I didn't like. We've been trying to figure out, since we're on sports, was trying to figure out a way to keep the Washington Redskins logo and do something that wasn't offensive, but something that was, a tip of the cap to the heritage. And then the problem is you get into Warriors and stuff like that, and it's like, well, you're still kind of talking about something kind of aggressive. There's another Warriors. Maybe that's a little whatever. But I started thinking about the Mohawk Indians walking up on the I-beams, and I thought we could call them the Washington Beam Men or Beam Walkers or some version of something to do with the building, the I-beams, I don't know, the girders.
Okay, that's a good jumping off point.
Point.
No pun intended.
Yes, like here's what you're known for. Here's what your heritage is. Here's something good. We keep it there. Beam Walkers, Beam. I don't know. It's sort of like Beeman, like Bob Beeman. Let's see.
Death Defiers.
Well, they're called Mohawk Iron Workers.
Iron Men.
Skywalkers.
Iron Men.
I think that's taken. I think Skywalker's taken.
All right, but how about Washington Iron Men? And we have the thing, and then we tell the story. Oh, they were the only ones brave enough to place all the iron beams up, all the big I-beams up there. They built this nation.
Yeah, Iron Man's kind of cool.
Let's not skip past Skywalkers. That's pretty fucking sweet. By the way, no one who understands that reference gives a shit about football.
I was going to say, good luck getting that past Disney.
Yeah.
Iron Man, not bad.
Iron Man, too.
Iron Man.
I like Iron Man.
Yeah.
There was a player for the Knicks. I can't believe I remember this. So obscure. In the 90s named Kenny Walker. He won the dunk contest in like 1991.
Yeah.
Kenny Skywalker. That's what his nickname was.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So I don't know if you've seen the pictures, we have them, of Donald Trump and daughter posting with beans, but they are making their way around the internet. Off the news that his niece have sold 950,000 copies of the Donald Trump book on the first day.
I heard it was 975 last time.
I then you might be right. I have it at 950. They both posed for a picture with a can of beans from the Goya guy, the CEO of Goya that heaped so much praise on him. And people are wondering if this could be an ethics violation for promoting Goya foods on social media, and some say it is. So basically, here's what I got it from. According to lawandcrime.com, there's a federal law that says an employee shall not use his public office for his own private gain, for the endorsement of any product, service, or enterprise, or the private gain of friends, relatives, or persons with whom the employee is affiliated in a non-governmental capacity. The promotion came on the heels of, him bestowing this praise, and that's when we got into the boycott versus boycott. But they're on board with the Goya people. They're fans.
I think obviously they're just whatever, pushing against whatever. First things first, those cans of beans could have been on that mahogany table left over from the last administration. We don't
100%
know.
True.
You don't. What'd you do? Did you check the Oval Office for beans?
I did not.
Okay, then if you didn't,
Yep.
then we'll never know.
They'll do a sweep for weapons or some sort of, something harmful. Beans, let it go.
Could have been there. Could have been there from the previous administration.
Yeah.
So we don't know.
Bad news, girl.
Well,
Speaking of the
no,
previous-
but you have to vet it.
Huh?
You know, you have to do your due diligence. You
No,
didn't do
you're
your
right,
due
you're right.
diligence.
Put the picture back up, Chris, because speaking of the previous administration, all I can think of when I look at this comical milieu is Adam Carolla on the show saying it was unpresidential when Obama filled out a fucking bracket.
Yes.
What about his grocery list on the desk of the what's it called? The desk, the
I don't know.
it's an official desk.
Resolute desk.
The Resolute desk.
Thank you.
This is official. Yeah, well, but to be fair to me, Obama was trying to be the president. You know what I mean?
Yes,
got you there,
that's
Brian.
a sharp distinction.
I don't think he's trying to be the president.
No, this is to own the libs.
I heard I was listening to an interview. They interviewed who was it? Erin Burnett. She interviewed the friend of the woman who wrote the book, the niece. There was a gag order for the niece. I guess it's been lifted.
Well, remember, it was a gag order for the niece, but not the publishing company.
Right.
Remember
So her friend, who she wrote the book at her home, so they say, she was interviewed by Erin Burnett, I think it was, and she wanted to know who took the test, who took the SATs for Trump, and I was watching it, and I thought it's 2:30. It's kind of funny, but you got to have a segment producer, and they got to do some vetting because listen to this interview with this woman who's her friend because they're trying to figure out who is the guy who may or may not have the first bombshell was Trump didn't take the SATs. He had somebody take the SATs for him, and we had to try to figure out who that person is and if we could interview them and if we could talk to them. Here is that interview. It's out front, I think, with Erin Burnett. Sorry.
Tonight, President Trump's brother making a last-ditch effort to stop the niece's tell-all book from publishing. His lawyers asking the judge to continue a gag order against Mary Trump, saying that her personal stories aren't protected political free speech. This comes as everyone is asking the big question, who is Joe Shapiro, the friend who Mary Trump says took the SAT test for Trump? Out front now, Alex Frankston. She is Mary Trump's best friend. She is speaking out on Mary's behalf as Mary's under that gag order. So I want to start with this question because it's gotten a lot of people talking. The allegation in the book, in Mary's book, that Trump paid his friend, a man named Joe Shapiro, to take his SATs for him. So everyone's been talking about this Joe Shapiro, and they found this Joe Shapiro who went to the University of Pennsylvania with Trump, and his wife, the former professional tennis player Pam Shriver, says there's no way it was him. He, of course, has passed away. Can you clear this up for us? Is that the Joe Shapiro that Mary is alleging did this, or is it someone else?
That's not the Joe Shapiro, and the timeline doesn't match up, and it wouldn't be logical. This Joe Shapiro and Mary's uncle would have been at Penn at the same time. That's not the one.
Right. So you're saying they hadn't even met at this point.
Joe Shapiro is a really common name on the East Coast.
Yes,
Really
yes, it
common.
is, which I think is a fair point to make. It is. So the White House says the whole claim is absurd, completely false. Those are their words. And is there anything more you can tell us about this person? And I know because there just is so much focus on it, obviously, because, she's saying this sets up the kind of person that the president was and is, his dishonesty and his lies, and that it started at this point. Is there anything more we're going to find out about the Joe Shapiro that she says did this and, whether he's still alive?
I don't think that there's going to be more about it because really it's only part and parcel of.
All right, you can pause it. I'm saying you got to get a segment producer to hit this chick before you put her on the camera, which is, I want to know which Joe Shapiro it is, and if it's not this one, and we don't know who it is, and who knows, then why are we interviewing this chick?
Yeah, it feels like a strange choice.
That's like a weird. But what I'm saying is they do interviews, you do pre-interviews all the time, and they go, look, we're going to call you, we're going to ask you about this guy, Joe Shapiro, we want to know what you know, and if the answer is like, yeah, that's a different guy, he's dead, and I don't, but do you know the real Joe Shapiro? Nah, I don't really know. Then you have to move on to
dead
another
end.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, or we'll go on to another subject.
And by the way, that Joe Shapiro conversation was about 5 to 6 minutes long. That was cut.
I told Max, but it's like, it's called Out Front. Go figure it out. She doesn't know who Joe Shapiro is. And I don't know who Joe Shapiro is anyway. But you know what's sad about me? When I hear about things like having people take the SATs for them, and everyone goes, "Oh my word!" I go, "Huh? Yeah, I wish I'd thought of that. I wish I had some fucking money."
That's a smart guy.
I wish I could have paid somebody. Yes,
resourceful.
He certainly better not be pardoning anyone going to jail or prison for the college admission scandal.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That'd be bad optics.
I'm sure that sounds so on point, right? Trump got somebody to take the SATs for him.
It's like what you talk about when things snap into focus. It's like, Trump may be a smart guy. Like he may have good business instincts or whatever. You can make that argument. He's clearly not like, verbal and like, he's not book smart. Exactly. I'm like, how this fucking guy pass the SATs? Or not pass, you know what I mean? How's he going to warn?
It's like, look, I could waste 3 hours of my day and come up with 1130, or I could get this Shapiro guy to do it for $1,000 and get a 1480. Like, I'm a businessman. I got plenty of money. I don't have much time. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. And it was also during a time when you could fake shit. There's no more faking shit anymore. There's a barcode and a retinal scan and a saliva swab. There's no... There'd be literally
security.
There'd be footage of you walking into the place and not walking out of the place. You just can't fake shit anymore. All right. What else you got, Gina?
Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Kanye West, Jeff Bezos, and those are just a few of the notable figures that all had their Twitter accounts hacked on Wednesday. Someone posted messages imploring followers to send Bitcoin to their account. Posing as the public figures, they said they'd double whatever anyone deposited for the next 30 minutes. And I think specifically some were saying, you send me $1,000 in Bitcoin, I'll send you $2,000. The hackers also targeted Twitter accounts of major figures in the cryptocurrency world. The accounts have since been secured. I know that a lot of the real accounts were shut down just to put a stop to this, but there's no word on how the hackers got in. Reports say they made at least $100,000 in like a half hour, and we're looking at some of them now. It says, "I'm giving back to the community. All Bitcoin sent to the address below will be sent back doubled. If you send 1,000, I'll send back 2,000, only for 30 minutes. That's on Joe Biden's. That's on Barack Obama's. And some people did it. I don't know how that works.
Well, it's good news for all of us who have Twitter accounts because it's plausible deniability for the next time you get drunk and call someone a fat ass or something, and then you get into hot water for it, and then you go, "Hey, man, that could have been some Russian bot, man. I mean, I didn't even do that." Like, now what we need is lots of cases of people hacking into other people's accounts so we have plausible deniability for whatever drunken tweets we send out. Yes.
Wait, I have a great idea, and it's actually your idea, so I think you're going to like it. You know when you used to give that advice on Loveline about women faking orgasms and hold one back every 3 or 4? I think in this case, to get that plausible deniability, every 20th tweet you send has to be something insane.
Right.
So like, no, I was hacked. So it doesn't just come out of nowhere. Like it's an ongoing thing. I'm working on it.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
I keep changing my password, but they keep figuring it out.
Yeah, it's a good call. Say something outrageous and scary and bizarre that you would never say, and then when you get drunk and say something you mean when you're drunk, then you won't be held accountable. But either way, this is good. It's interesting, the whole crypto kind of version of this, which is a way to literally make money digitally, where
untraceable.
I mean, there was famously from a million years ago. There was a joke where like Soupy Sales, like in the 50s or the 60s, like did a thing where he said he was doing a kid show, and he's like, "All right, kids, if you're all watching, I want you to go to your mommy and your daddy's wallet and purse and get $1 out and send it to Uncle Soupy Sales." Like, there's a famous story where a bunch of money
and it happened
came in, and it happened. This is kind of a version of that. I like Ironman, the Washington Ironman.
Yeah,
it's tough.
I should point. No, sorry. I should point out that I saw this on Twitter, and a number of our listeners let me know that this hack happened at the Twitter level. Like they got into an administrator's password. They didn't like hack these individual accounts. They like got in like someone. So I guess the story will come out eventually, but someone got in at the administrator level and was able to access. That's why they access so many, just from the top down, famous people accounts.
It's not great.
I want to tell you about cross rope real quick. We're all looking for ways to stay fit out there while spending more time at home. Cross rope, it's a weighted jump rope system that makes home workouts fun, and you get a good workout. You do it in no time and no worries. You get a full body workout in under 30 minutes. Combines high-intensity cardio with full-body strength training. I am telling you, this thing is a great product. I use it. I've always told you I skip rope, and it's good because you work on rhythm, and you're also kind of working from the balls of your feet up to your shoulders and sort of beyond. And when you add some weight, you can really feel it in your arms, your lats, your back, your shoulders. It's easy to get started. They have different weights. You order the ropes, you download the app, enjoy the results. App gives you free anytime access and for a quick workout, fun, challenging, and it's easy to take on the road if you're going somewhere. Travel. All the gyms and the hotels are closed now, but you can take your cross rope with you. So you take that with you. It'll map your progress with the app. 60-day risk-free introduction trial, and it's a risk-free guarantee. Right, Dawson?
If you're ready for a new cardio and full-body home workout, visit crossrope.com/Adam. Get up to $40 off Crossrope sets, plus free shipping when you check out today at crossrope.com/Adam. That's ADAM. Crossrope.com/Adam.
All right. What else you got, Gina Grad?
A group of protesters and New York City cops clashed on the Brooklyn Bridge on Wednesday, with at least 3 officers injured by a man who appeared to be swinging a large stick at the officers, according to the video footage, which I'll show you in a second. The violence occurred while police were arresting a protester on the opposite side of one of the fences of the bridge. And according to a department spokesman, Police Chief Terrence Monahan was one of the white-shirted officers seen in the video, and he suffered a hand injury. He's like the top guy. A second brawl broke out between protesters and police, not far from the first. A total of 37 people arrested. But the footage I'm showing you, you're going to see a bunch of guys standing over some cops and just hitting them with sticks as they're trying to arrest somebody.
El Kabong, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this. First off, it's kind of weird and rough because you watch the news and like this guy picked up a stick and I'm like, is it a guy? It looks like they have a bun. And also,
that means nothing these days.
Well, that means nothing. But also, you used to just go, this guy picked up a stick because women didn't involve themselves in these activities. And now women are in, like they're on the front line. You've come a long way, baby. You're swinging pool cues at cops. I mean, the women are in the fray now. And when I kept looking at it, I was like, I think that's a woman, but I couldn't tell. But there's a very dangerous thing that's happening, which is if a cop or a couple of cops go into a community and are trying to arrest somebody, you're in kind of a vulnerable position when you're trying to arrest someone. Your back is sort of to the crowd, and sometimes you're struggling with that person. If the community, who formerly used to kind of stay out of the way, if the community is going to get involved, you're going to have a very difficult time arresting that person. If you're trying to arrest a person and 10 other people come up behind you and they're trying to assault you, this is scary. Two things are going to happen. Cops are going to just stop going in there and arresting anybody, which is going to cause more people, more gun deaths and more chaos. But also, it's going to get some people shot in that scrum. Yeah, this person was just whacking these cops over the head it was a stick, but it's weird because if it was like a broomstick, it shouldn't have caused that kind of damage. It must have been a piece of metal. It must have been like a piece of conduit or something. But either way, the idea is there's a bunch of cops doing their job and you run tour them with a weapon to the fear factor of cops needs to go up just a little bit. Yes, Brian.
Far be it for me to shit on your point, but Tessa hit me in the hand, this hand right here, with one of her little toy broomsticks, which is about yay long. It's 3.5 feet. That fucking thing left a welt for a month and a half. It was not a welt, but it was raised almost like a cyst, and it finally went away last week. But I'm telling you, man, if she can do that if a 3-year-old can do that damage with a toy, an adult, with an actual stick is gonna fuck you up.
Well, but Tessa has a lot more upper body than most
True.
5-year-olds.
I'm a lot more fragile. I'm a lot more
Very
fragile.
Do. But yeah, this, I don't know, was it a man or a woman? It's sad that I can't tell. But used to be able to tell by either the bun or the activity, and now they're both out the window.
Out the window.
Yeah. Either way, good luck, New York. All the cops are retiring early. Everyone's moving out. It's going to be a hellscape over there.
I'm seeing it was a man.
It was a man.
Well, there are news publications that saying holding his stick. So
All right, let's do one more, Gina Grad.
All right, let's just get a little update on the Johnny Depp court case real quick. So more weird stuff coming out about this thing. The property manager, Kevin Murphy, testified in Depp's libel suit that Amber Heard told him in December 2015 that he had hit her in the face several times and pulled her hair. But he says there were no marks, no bruises, cuts, redness, swelling, nothing.
Smart. That's how you do it.
Heard's face. A bag of oranges. Nor was there any area on the head where her hair appeared to have been pulled. Murphy said he was shown a photo of her dated the day after this encounter with marks all over her face. Murphy said they were a hoax. Meanwhile, Depp, who's suing the Sun newspaper for calling him a wife beater, allegedly badmouthed Heard in text to her then assistant while they were getting divorced and said she was a 50-cent stripper, a gold digger, and had a flabby behind.
Flabby behind. That stings. She also put a picture of him up, passed out, eating ice cream, which made me...
Oh, he went Hasselhoff.
Made me kind of respect him. Like, this guy was eating ice cream. There's a picture of it. He's just passed out eating ice cream, and the ice cream's just kind of dripping down his knee and thigh. And I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was capsized or it's just melted, but...
that's tough stuff.
I just like the idea. First off, it's obviously coffee or peanut butter or some version of that. I'm trying to figure out what kind of container it's in. Did it fall over?
It's upside down.
Glass?
I don't know.
It looks like a sundae, a tall sundae dish. And by the mix, and it's melted, as an expert, I'm going to say that it's chocolate syrup and vanilla ice cream. And it is now melted in his lap, and he ate the cherry, and he doesn't like nuts.
I hope they have a dog, because this is the best day ever. If your owner passes out and capsizes a sundae on their lap, that is good eating if you're the family pet. Also, I don't know why she needed to take a picture of it, but I guess she was mounting a case at this point.
And remember, she had the hidden video when he was drunk and pissed off in their kitchen and kind of egging him on a little bit. And remember, they also claimed that she or one of her friends shat in their bed. Cool. So this is a volatile relationship from the get-go.
Chris, can you use the enhance button on that to see if that's Talenti ice cream? Because that comes in a sort of container like that. Just playing a hunch.
It's pixely, even with the enhance. But let me look at the container. And
are you sure you're enhancing it? I don't hear a noise that goes.
Nobody's yelling enhance in my ear either.
Anyway, he says he was working hard. That's why he passed out with the ice cream. That passing out with an ice cream on your belly feels like very drunken activity to me. That feels.
You think?
I'm going to go with drunk on that one. Could have been from work, but I'm going to go from drinking. All right, let me hit Geico right now. Geico's offering you an extra 15% off credit motorcycle, RV, auto policies. That's 15% on top of the money they're already saving you if you're going with Geico. But if you go with Geico, you get the Geico discount and you get the 15%. So it's never been a better time to switch over to Geico. Save an extra 15% when you switch by October 7th. Visit geico.com and learn more at geico.com.
Brian,
yes.
good eye. It does look like it's Talenti, and I'm basing this strictly off the screw top. It has like a mason jar style screw top in both. So
because Talenti has a clear container, and whatever's in there is going to leave. It's going to look like whatever was in there.
Brian, you are missing your calling as an expert ice cream witness. Kirkos could trot you in. You could be Frusenglaschen, please. You're insulting me.
Get out of my face with that Haagen-Dazs shit.
That's right. Yes, you could be the forensic ice cream expert, and at some point you could go, that's not ice cream. That's sherbet. And the entire courtroom would be like,
The prosecution claims it was Dreyer's, but he was from Massachusetts, so it's Breyer's.
That's right.
Start rubbing it in your gums.
Yeah, Neapolitan? I don't think so. All right, let's bring it home, Gina Grad.
You got it. I'm Gina Grad, and that's the news.
Gina Grad.
That was the news with Gina Grad.
All right, Bjorn Lomborg is waiting for us on the other line. I will bid adieu to Bald and Gina. We'll take a quick break and be back with the president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center, who's got a new book out, and we'll talk to Bjorn right after this.
It's time to check Adam's voicemail.
Adam, hey brother, just got through watching your Danny Trejo interview. You have been knocking it out of the park. Jason Whitlock, Randy Rainbow, Dio Hughley, Sean Penn, Travis Pastrana. Oh my God, it's just awesome.
You can leave us a message at 888-634-1744.
Well, we're going to keep the streak alive with Bjorn Lomborg, who's got his book out. We spoke to him a couple of months ago, and we stayed off of this subject until the book was released, and it is now released, available on Amazon. It's called False Alarm: How Climate Change Panic Cost Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. Good to speak to you again, my friend.
It's great to be back.
So before we get into the specifics of your book, and if you disagree, I feel like we're entering a period in on this planet where we're finally able to have honest conversations about things without being called the denier, or you hate your grandchildren, or being sort of just tarred and feathered, or racist, or like a whatever. Like we're finally getting to some sort of saturation point where we're able to say, look, we all want the same thing. We all love our children. We all love the planet. Might we have a sensible conversation?
I would love to be in that place. My sense is actually the opposite, that over the last couple of years, there's been ever more sense of panic on the climate change front. And as more and more people believe this really is the end of the world. Look, there's a recent survey that showed that almost half of the world's population now believes that global warming is likely to mean the extinction of the human race. When you think that kind of thing, people get very, very antsy about anyone questioning anything you're going to do. So my sense is actually why we definitely should have that open conversation, because we're talking about spending lots and lots of resources. We should talk about, are we doing that well? I feel like we often are being told, no, you can't have that conversation. There's only one right answer. It's the end of the world. We need to throw everything in the kitchen sink at this.
Well, let me reframe that a little bit and say, maybe it's my perception that there are more outlets for people like you. There used to just be a mainstream media, and if you had an opinion that differed with theirs, then you were not welcome. And now there's so many different outlets now that there are places that welcome a voice like your voice.
And that's true. And that is both, thank you very much for having me on, but also I think that is crucial for us as a civilization to actually get all of our challenges right. If we don't talk about this, how the hell are we actually going to make good decisions?
Right. So we agree, or you agree, that the globe is where there's warming, and that it's caused by man. So it's not a denier sort of situation. There is warming. It is being caused by man. And the question is how do we go about remedying this, or how do we go about diminishing the negative effects as much as we can? And there's technologies that we're not aware of. I've said, many times, when I was growing up, you and I are the same age. I grew up with, the internal combustion engine is going to destroy the atmosphere, but then somebody came up with a catalytic converter and many other things. And what's coming out of the tailpipe of a car, when I was a kid, if somebody started their car in their garage and you walked in the garage, you couldn't breathe, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I can run my car in my garage now with the door shut and you can't even tell. I mean, it's the same internal combustion engine.
Don't do that at home, though.
I won't, but it's the same engine. It's the same internal combustion engine with so much technology that is so much cleaner now. So there's that. Let's focus on potential technologies.
Yes. If I could just add just before, because you just said, look, I totally accept global warming is happening and it's man-made and we should do something about it. I also mostly use the UN climate panel, the gold standard of understanding what is up and down. So this is not a conversation about, there are these murky websites that we should visit and think about. This is the exact stuff that everybody agrees on, but we don't have the conversation on how do we smartly tackle these problems. So when you talk about technology, we are simply not at a place where we can dramatically change over to low or zero carbon technology right now. It would cost us a fortune, which of course is why we've spent $5 trillion in subsidies to solar and wind over the last 10, 20 years. And we have tried really, really hard. And still we're only at about a little more than 1% of global energy comes from solar and wind. So we need something else that is going to be much cheaper and much more effective if we're actually going to convince most of the world to switch over. So technology is absolutely the answer. You were never going to tell people don't drive. What you could tell them is get a catalytic converter so your car doesn't pollute. And that's indeed what we all did.
Well, I think sort of the disconnect is once people couch it as a life and death situation, then they say it doesn't matter how much it costs, or it doesn't matter how difficult it would be to implement this technology. It doesn't matter because we're going to die, so we have to do everything. And the problem with that is if you have a technology that is clean and it's efficient, but it can't be utilized in, China or India or parts of the third world or whatever, if it's not going to be used, well, then who cares how clean it is if it's not being utilized? If people are still burning wood and coal or dung or wherever they are, well, then who cares hypothetically or from a technological standpoint what a breakthrough you have if the world isn't using it?
Exactly. So I think you just nailed in the head 2 points. One, we need to confront the climate panic, because if we think this is the end of the world, we're unlikely to do anything but say, let's throw everything in the kitchen sink at this. And we're unlikely to listen to rational argument because, as you just pointed out, we need to spend everything. We just got to do everything we can. The second part is, unless we can get the rest of the world along, this is not a discussion about well-meaning rich people in the US and Europe and other places to switch a little bit of their energy supply to more green energy. That's all nice, but it's not really going to make a big difference. It is about making sure that everyone, the Chinese, the Indians, Africa, Latin America, everybody else will actually join in. And that only happens if we have technology that's actually sufficiently cheap. We need to have both of those conversations, and I'm glad we're having it today.
I am too. And, the United States kind of has this world revolves around us. And I think a lot of that is because art and a lot of entertainment, sports, we're sort of taste makers. You want to be our movie stars or the biggest movie stars. Like, I'm from the United States, and if somebody goes, this guy's the biggest star in China, I go, that's sweet. Yeah. We got Brad Pitt. We got real stars over here. Like, we feel that way kind of about everything. And I think that sort of narcissism sort of bleeds over into global warming. Like, we keep going, we got to clean up our act. We got to get 100% solar. It's like, we don't represent enough of the planet to change things if we can't get India and Africa and Russia and China. If we can't get them on board, then what is this one? But it's a very it's kind of an ugly American thing. And I don't know, does Sweden sort of have that sort of holier than thou kind of thing as well?
There's definitely some holier than thou, but I think they know that they're not the whole world. And we still watch Brad Pitt and all the others. So I think we're much more into understanding that there's a lot of other big players out there. But you're absolutely right. Fundamentally, so unless we can get everybody on board to do this, we're not actually solving anything. We have this idea that we can just virtue signaling our way to this. No, I mean, that's going to make us feel good, but it's not actually going to solve anything for our descendants. And I don't think our descendants are going to judge us on how well we felt. They're going to judge us on how well we actually did.
Right. So, when I grew up, there was a lot of discussions about, how dirty the rivers were and how polluted the air was. And I grew up in Los Angeles. We had, 80 smog days a year in Los Angeles with a population. And now listen, kids, don't check me on this, but I'm just going to make it up. We had 3 million people living in the Los Angeles basin, and we had 80 smog days a year in 1974. And now we have 10 million people and 1 smog day a year or no smog days a year. So how did we do this? So many more cars, so many more human beings. Well, we did it with technology. And the rivers were a mess too. It was like, the rivers, and we cleaned up a lot of rivers. Like, we're pretty good at using technology to clean things up and to make things work. And so anyway, sorry, thoughts on that subject?
Well, and I think we also need to recognize that it stems from you being rich. If you're rich, you can afford to fix many problems. If you're poor, you simply have much more urgent needs, like making sure your kids don't die tonight, or get them enough food, or get a job, or get education. So the reality here is, if we want to fix climate, we also have to recognize that for the vast majority of humanity, this is about getting them out of poverty. This is about getting them a life that's actually worth living, so that they can get to the point where they actually start saying, look, I'd like to have less indoor air pollution. I'd like to have less outdoor air pollution. I'd like to have our rivers clean. And then eventually also, I'd like to not emit so much CO2.
It's funny because all the years I worked construction out here in Los Angeles, and I would work with a lot of poor Latin guys. And when they were done at lunch, they'd finish off their Coke cans and they'd go right into the garbage can. And I would go, in the recycling, put them in the recycling bin. And they'd go like, yeah, all right. Mm-hmm. And then the next day they'd throw, and I'd go, you got to recycle. And I realized that's not important to them. It just isn't. You have to get to a station in life where that's a kind of a first world problem, where you can really sweat and wring your hands over the Coke can going into the wrong bin. In their world, it's much more about survival than it is about these. These are problems that one day, God willing, you'll get to, but they're not the kind of problems that most of the world thinks of now. And we look at everything through our lens. So we're like, why don't you just recycle? Or why are you burning coal or wood? Why don't you use renewables? And it's like, because they're not there yet. And we can't expect them to be there yet. So what are some of the things, I heard you talking on Dennis Prager's show earlier today about nuclear, which I like, but you were explaining that it's cost prohibitive because of the cost of actually building a facility?
So nuclear obviously is a great technology for providing 24/7 power. It actually gives you backup power, unlike solar and wind. You can count it all the time. It is surprisingly very, very safe. So, people think that this is really terrible, but no, it's actually one of the safest energy sources. Yes, there's Chernobyl. Yes, there's Fukushima. They kill very, very few people. And remember, most other energy technologies kill far more people and on a very regular basis. The problem with nuclear right now is that it's fairly costly. The nuclear power that you already have, because we've already paid for the power station, you should just run as long as you possibly can, because it's incredibly cheap power you get from existing nuclear power plants. So you should not close down nuclear power plants. That's incredibly dumb. But building new ones turn out to take a long time. They typically run vastly over cost. And so the total cost of actually getting power from nuclear power stations is about 2 to 3 times what it costs from fossil fuels and also from some of the cheapest solar and wind. So the idea here is you need to remember, unless we can innovate the price of nuclear down, and we should, and Bill Gates and many other smart people are trying to do so, we are not going to be able to solve the climate crisis with nuclear.
Well, nuclear is one of those things, and it's part and parcel of what you're talking about, which is, let's have a discussion about energy and about the environment, but let's not assign a bunch of negative or positive traits to one form or another. Out here, some idiot in 1974 coined the phrase "no nukes," and now we decided we were done with nuclear power because some asshole said no nukes. That's literally how dumb we can be. And when we decided that we like solar farms, got the word farm and sun in it. So solar farm sounds good. Windmill, that sounds good. Okay, that's good. Nuclear, no nukes. And the first things, let's just remove all the stigma and all the baggage and all the theatrics from it, and really just drill down on what is the most effective and has the smallest carbon footprint. And I guess that is nuclear, but now we're years away from building new facilities, and the cost is incredible.
Yeah. And so fundamentally, we can only get to this conversation if we stop the panic. That's why that's the first subline of my book. Climate change panic is costing us trillions. We need to stop this panic. How do you do that? Well, if you look at what the UN climate panel actually tells us, it tells us that by 2070, so about 50 years from now, the net impact of climate change, if we do nothing, is equivalent to making us somewhere between 0.2 and 2% less well off. It's like deducting 0.2 to 2% of your income. Remember, by 2070s, you're going to be much richer. Well, you and I probably aren't, because we're not going to be around, but people like us and our kids are going to be much richer. On average, we expect kids or people, and by then, on average, across the world, to be 2.63 times richer. So what they're really telling us is, instead of being 2.63 times richer, it'll feel slightly less. We'll only be 2.56 times richer. And that sort of puts it in context. This is not the end of the world, as many people are telling us. This means we'll be slightly less, much richer in 2075. That's a very different way of approaching it. And this is not me saying it. This is the UN climate panel telling us what is up and down here.
Well, I'm always curious. It's sort of like, I wrote a book as well, and there was a couple of pages in that book, which is recently out as well, which is, they've been telling us that, 1 in 5 women would be sexually assaulted on a college campus. And my question then is, why are you saving up for college for your 12-year-old daughter if in fact you believe that. And what I'm starting to realize is I don't think they believe a lot of the stuff they're saying. I grew up with a hippie mom in the 70s. We're going to have to live underground. There's going to be an ice age. We're going to be out of food. And it just keep going from generation to generation to generation. Now it's spilled over to AOC, and they're talking about 12 years or 10 years. What percentage of those people really believe what they're saying, or are they saying what they're saying in order to get you to behave the way they want you to behave, knowing that their proclamations probably aren't true, but it's still going to be a way to keep you, they're going to save you from yourself. I've been hearing this since I was 7 years old in the 70s about the world is going to end, ice age, famine, out of food, living underground. It's never happened. Then there's AOC, there's Al Gore in between, there's AOC now. Do they believe it's going to happen, or are they saying it to, like you talk to a child, do your homework, the boogeyman's under the bed. If you don't do your homework, the boogeyman's going to get, because I know what's best for you because I'm smarter than you.
There's probably a little bit of both, but my sense is, I've debated a lot of these people, and I think they really believe this is an existential crisis. If you talk yourself into this, and if you start looking out on the world and you hear one news story after the other telling you this is the end of the world, then clearly you will sort of get this confirmation bias, and you'll say, yeah, it really is going to come to an end. And so, therefore, we need to do everything. But just to, I actually go through a lot of these stories and show you how it comes that you hear a little bit of truth and a lot of exaggeration. So last year, Washington Post and many, many other papers across the country and the world had the story that 187 million people are going to have to move because of sea level rise by the end of the century. And some even went further and said they're all going to drown, those 187 million people. How did they get to that? Well, they said sea levels are going to rise because of global warming. That's absolutely true. And then they said all of these people are going to do nothing. They're just going to sit there and watch the waves lap up over their knees, and eventually, they'll drown in 80 years. And of course, that's not actually what happens. So the paper that looked at the 187 million also said, what will happen if people do sensible adaptation? Turns out that instead of 187 million people being flooded, it was 305,000 people that were going to be flooded by the end of the century. Remember, 305,000 people is half the number of people that move out of California every year. Of course, we can handle that move in the world over 80 years. So they were 600 times exaggerated, but it makes you scared when you hear that story. And of course, the newspapers are going to run with the 187 million rather than the 300,000. So you hear the scary story. These people believe this is the end of the world. And so I think a lot of them really believe we've got to do something, and we got to do something now. And then, of course, once their deadline run out, as they often have, they'll have a new one and say, now this is the deadline. And if we don't get it done, we're all going to die.
Well, it's kind of the atheist rapture, right? Like most these, we're not talking about Christians or Catholics here. These are atheists, and this is their version of the rapture, which I understand there's a part of our brain evidently as human beings that is carved out for some rapture thought. And there's a religious version, and this is the New York Times version of the rapture. The seas shall reclaim the earth. And as you were talking about it, you're talking about technology, and I've heard you talk about, man and innovation and stuff. And I was thinking, well, wait a minute. Don't we know this? Because New Orleans is below sea level. We had seawalls that were built. They were not kept up to code. The Army Corps of Engineers kind of let them slide into disrepair. Then Katrina rolled around and kind of jumped the wall. And I'm oversimplifying this, but if those walls were looked after and maintained, and the Corps of Engineers did their due diligence, then we wouldn't have flooded. We have places that are below sea level, and we use technology and building and construction to stave off nature.
Of course. Look, Holland, 40% of Holland is below sea level. The world's 14th largest airport, Amsterdam Airport, is below sea level. It's actually the only airport, as they like to advertise on their website, the only airport that's built on a former site for a Navy battle. But the fundamental point is we know how to fix this when we were much poorer and had much less technology. Of course, we're going to fix this today. And there's something wrong with the argument of saying all of these things are going to happen and nothing but climate is going to change. No, humans are actually going to adapt. Again, this does not mean that there's no problem. Climate change is a problem, but it's not the catastrophe that many people like to sell because we are able to adapt.
Is there, for instance, and if you disagree with any of this, please correct me, but many people I know now have fled California. They've moved to Arizona. Arizona used to be a little too wasn't hospitable enough for human beings. Like, it just got too damn hot. And before, everyone had air conditioning in their cars and air conditioning central air in their homes and, misters on their patios that spread out vapor, water mist and cooled them outside and recirculating and going out to a movie theater with the air and the mall with the air and stuff. And now you can live quite nicely in an environment that, hey, in the 50s, in the 40s, in the 30s, you couldn't live there. I mean, it was too tough to live there. And I think the growth in population has proven that. So we've solved with technology. We've taken a place that wasn't really inhabitable and we've made it habitable. Is that exactly accurate?
And not only is it accurate, it also shows you how we're going to solve most problems. So clearly, one of the things that a lot of people worry about is as temperatures rise, we're going to have a lot of negative impacts because it's worse when it's really, really hot. That's true. But we, for most places, fix this technologically exactly with air conditioning. So while everybody focuses on heat, obviously that's the big problem with climate change, we have to remember that the vast majority of people actually die from cold. A big study in The Lancet a couple of years ago showed that every time one person dies from heat, 17 people die from cold. And so from moderate temperature rises, it's likely that that you'll actually see more people having benefits because they'll stop dying from cold.
What technology can we look forward to in terms of producing the kind of energy that someone like you would want and we need? There's been so much talk about so many not alternative. We all get the solar and we all get the wind. There's a tide version of this, maybe geothermal, but is there something that's right around the corner? Is there something that looks promising? What or what is out there that we're not aware of, or that my listeners may not be aware of, that you think is promising?
So there's a lot of promising technologies. So clearly, we should have batteries for solar and wind, because the real problem is not getting solar when the sun is shining or wind when the wind is blowing, but is what are you going to do when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing? We need much more batteries and we need them much cheaper. Just to give you a sense of the size, right now, the U.S. has enough battery power to store the average electricity used in the U.S. for 17 seconds. So clearly, we're nowhere near what we need to get. Likewise, we talked about nuclear earlier. If we could innovate the fourth generation nuclear to be much cheaper than fossil fuels, that'd be amazing. That's what Gates and many others are trying to do. They're trying to make these very simple, basically nuclear power plants you can build on assembly lines. You can assemble them like Legos and you can put them up and they're very safe. That would be amazing. But again, it requires a lot more research. There are lots and lots of other great ideas, and I outline a lot of them in my book, but let me just give you one of them. So the idea that we could actually capture CO2 from the atmosphere. So, the big problem is that we emit a lot of CO2 when we use all our fossil fuels. Imagine if we could just go along doing that and then capture it again from the air and store it as rocks, for instance. If we could do that really cheaply, we would basically be done. We can't right now, but if we innovate that, possibly we could make this a very cheap and manageable challenge. And then, of course, the world would actually have fixed climate change.
Well,
So there are lots of technologies.
Capturing CO2 and storage of CO2, how would that work?
So the idea, it's a little bit what trees do right now. Trees take up CO2 and grow big, but we just can't do it because there's not enough land on the planet. But what you could do is essentially have scrubbers of the atmosphere. They'll just be standing out in the open, taking in the atmosphere, which has a little bit of CO2, and scrub out the CO2. That's the hard part, because it's very, very few molecules you need to get out. And then you have them react in some way and store them in something either just deep underground. Ironically, you could store it in gas chambers. So first we take out the gas and then you store the CO2 down there. Or you could store it as rocks, that is inert stuff. There's lots of different proposals for how to do that. But basically, the idea would be that we take out the CO2 that we pumped into the atmosphere, and then we don't have a climate problem.
Where are you with hydrogen as it pertains to like automobiles?
So hydrogen is one of those solutions that we've heard for a long time. It basically, if we could produce it with wind power and then use it in our cars, we would basically have a closed loop that wouldn't emit CO2. The problem is hydrogen is really hard to store. It's pretty dangerous, and it's fairly costly to make the transition. So it's one of those things that maybe it'll happen, but there's a lot of arguments why it probably won't. But again, the whole idea here is to recognize if we have lots and lots of ideas, we don't have to make that decision. We simply fund all those researchers, go crazy on all these different ideas, because that's really, really cheap. And then we just need one or a few of those technologies to actually work. And those are the ways that we're going to power the 21st century.
What about biodiesel, algae, things of that nature?
So algae might actually be a really good idea. So Craig Venter, the guy who cracked the human genome back in 2000, he's working on this algae that you can put out on the ocean surface and grow oil. So it would take up sunlight and CO2, and then we put it in our tanks and burn it and emit the same CO2. So it would be CO2 neutral. It's not commercially viable right now, but if he could magically make it much better, that'd be cool. Then we could go on living as we did before. We'd have lots of oil and it would be CO2 free. With biodiesel, that unfortunately requires a lot of land, because basically you take corn in the US, or you take some other crop, you grow it, and that takes up space that you could otherwise have used for making food. That drives up food prices. You also use up a lot of land that otherwise could be used for nature, and you require a lot of land to just replace part of the U.S. infrastructure. So it is something that a lot of people use because it's very easy and it's cheap and it makes it feel like you're doing a lot of good for the environment. But the reality is it's probably not the main part that you're going to do for solving climate.
Where do you think we're going to be with electric car technology? And everyone thinks it's kind of free, but there's a lot of heavy metals and a lot of batteries and a lot of things that we're going to have to deal with down the line. So it's not really free. But what's your thoughts on electric cars and their environmental impact?
So a lot of people talk about the batteries and how we don't have enough resources for that. I think we've shown pretty convincingly that if you want to do something, you can actually do that fairly easily. Of course, we can get those raw materials. It's going to take a lot of effort, and yes, it's not going to be free, but we can certainly do that. But I think we have no sense of how little the impact on electric cars are actually going to be. So the International Energy Agency estimates that if we manage by 2030 to get about 300 million electric cars in the world. Remember, that would be an amazing feat. Right now, we have about 5 million. So that would be an incredible increase. That would still only reduce global emissions of CO2 by 0.1%. So this is a very, very small thing. And unfortunately, right now, electric cars are mainly playthings for rich people. They're fairly expensive, and we subsidize them enormously because it makes people feel good, but they actually cut fairly little CO2. So to give you a sense, in California, you probably subsidize an electric car to the tune of about $10,000. Plus, of course, you give them right to go in the high occupancy lane. What is it called?
Diamond lane. Yeah, HOV.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you get free parking and you get free recharging and all that stuff. So it's a subsidy to rich people. How much good does it do? Well, if you look at the amount of CO2 it reduces, you could have reduced that on one of the trading systems, for instance, the Reggie in the Northwest US, and it would have cost you $50. So you spend $10,000 on cutting the same amount of CO2 that you could have done for just $50. That's a bad deal. Electric cars are going to come. We should definitely encourage them. We shouldn't be spending $10,000 right now. We should wait 10 years and have everyone buy them because they're good.
I'm sorry. Did you say trading deal? I was unclear.
Sorry. So for instance, there's many places. Europe has a big trading system, but where you basically say to a lot of different power plants, for instance, you can only emit this much, and so they have to find a way to adjust that. And then you buy permits to emit your emissions. What this means is that you essentially have a trading place where you can go in and say, I can buy an extra ton of CO2. I can buy that reduction here. And somebody will magically make that happen by using a little less coal and a little more gas or that kind of thing. So you can do that in the most cost-effective way. That's what they do, for instance, in the Reggie in the Northeast. And so the idea is you could go on that market and basically force them to cut 10 tons of CO2. That's what your electric car will do over a decade, but you could do that for about $50. If you can do it for $50, why would you spend $10,000 to achieve the same?
Well, the electric car we're very, I guess, and I don't know what it's like in Sweden, but for us, everything is symbolic. We like to do a lot of virtue signaling. And so celebrities who could drive around in Rolls Royces, drive around in Priuses, and then we get on everyone's case for flying privately and not flying on Southwest Airlines. And we do a lot of sort of symbolic stuff, but we're very symbolically oriented just for everything, for Black Lives Matter to everything else down. It's like a lot of gestures and symbolism and not a lot of action or actual getting stuff done. So it's like, the mayor is painting Black Lives Matter on the streets, and 5 blocks away, some black kids getting shot. That's kind of how we do it as a country. I don't know if you guys do it so symbolically.
There's a lot of that, and of course there's 2 negative parts about that as well. If you drive around in your Tesla and feel really virtuous, we know from research that means you also feel more okay to do something unvirtuous. You've sort of on the plus column, so now you can go, you can take a trip to Mexico kind of thing. And then, of course, you blow your entire emission reduction. The second thing is just remember, environmentalists constantly tell us, fly a little less, drive a little less, do with a little less, don't drive to work all the time. We just did that. That's what Corona has done for the whole world. So we've just had that incredible shutdown around the world. Remember, China almost entirely shut down in March, but we know how much that actually saved. At the most shutdown day in China, they still emitted 78% of their CO2. Because you still have to live, you still have to heat your house, you still have to do a lot of other stuff. So actually, even if we manage to get everyone to stop driving, everyone to stop flying, all this other stuff, we would only cut a little bit. There's one guy who, a climate scientist, who estimated how much will the total shutdown of the world actually matter by 2100. And the answer is, first of all, you won't be able to measure it, but on the models, you will have reduced temperatures by 1/500th of a degree Fahrenheit.
Right.
So we got to recognize this is not about you and me doing a little bit. By all means, do that, but this is not what's going to solve the problem. That's technology.
Well, what if it's not? So we live here, and look, not only am I in the United States, not only am I in California, I'm in Hollywood. So it's a constant beating of a drum of like, you got to ride share and then take your electric car and recycle your Gatorade bottle. And it's like, it all feels like, just window dressing. And it is. But people do it anyway, and it kind of feels good, and it feels like you're doing something when nothing is getting done. But if it's not automobiles, where does the lion's share of the CO2 gases come from? What would be the most impactful thing we could do in terms of reduction of that?
Well, I think
sector?
The point
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the point is exactly we can't do very much. Now, people will argue you should go vegetarian, but actually, if you look at it, meat emits a lot of CO2. I'm vegetarian, by the way. But, if you cut your meat production, it also means that your food is cheaper. So you will spend your money on other things that emit CO2. We actually know that the right answer is going vegetarian will probably cut about 2% of your emissions, or the equivalent of about $3 in the veggie. You could eat all the meat you like and pay $3 and you would have achieved the same emission reduction. If you look at flying, sure, if you actually cut a lot of flying, you could reduce your emissions significantly for you. But remember, most of the rest of the world wants to get flying, and it has lots and lots of great benefits. Again, I think we need to recognize we're never going to solve problems by telling people, I'm sorry, could you do with less? What you do fix problems with is coming up with better technologies. Can I just give you an example? Back from in the 1860s, we used whales to basically harvest them for oil, because the oil from whales burnt really, really cleanly, really, really brightly. So it was used all across Western Europe and North America as the best kind of way to light your home. And that's why we started hunting the whales to extinction. The solution to hunting whales to extinction wasn't to tell everyone, I'm sorry, could you turn down the lights? Could you go back to camphor oil and all the soot in your ceiling? The solution, of course, was here's a better technology that'll provide all the stuff you like, but cheaper and more effectively. And that was petroleum when we found oil in Pennsylvania in 1862. Suddenly you get a much better technology, much cheaper, and then people stopped hunting whales. The same idea goes today. Don't try to tell people, I'm sorry, do with less. Be sorry, don't do this. It's always ever going to be, as you say, window dressing. The right way to do this is through technology. If we could come up with cheap fourth generation nuclear power that'll outcompete fossil fuels, everyone will switch. If we could come up with incredibly cheap solar plus batteries, everyone will switch, and so on. So it's really down to technology. You're not going to get people to do with less, but you will make them do with smarter.
Well, I can tell you through sort of anecdotal experience of flying model airplanes. It's going to take a second, but it's going to make sense. 20 years ago, they first came out with like electric model airplanes, and the battery pack was a brick. I mean, it was literally, if you wanted to fly a ducted fan, that was kind of a poor man's jet airplane, had a fan in the middle of it. It's what it was. It was a ducted fan airplane. You had this brick of what was like C-cell batteries, and you'd have to daisy chain them, and there'd be a brick of maybe 8 or 9 of them. And if you could picture 8 or 9 C-cell batteries shrink wrapped, and picture the heft of that in your hand, and then picture trying to fly that thing, it would be very difficult. Electric model airplanes used to account for almost nothing in terms of the amount you'd see out there for the modelers and the people that were hobbyists. And now I feel like it's more than 50% of the market because the batteries got lighter and more powerful, and people aren't good or evil. It's just if you can fly that model airplane and do it efficiently and not have to go out there with fuel and a starter and smell the fumes and hear the noise and the expense and so on and so forth, then you'll happily do it. You won't do it if it's not going to be efficient. You will do it if technology caught up to electric model planes, and now most people happily fly their electric model planes because the batteries got smaller and lighter in a pretty short period of time. I mean, it went from unrealistic in the year 2000 to, oh, why wouldn't you do it 10 years later? It didn't even make sense not to use electric.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same kind of dramatic and transformational innovation we need for society. But again, also, let's just remember the size of what we're talking about. I mentioned before that you have right now battery power to store 17 seconds of U.S. average electricity. We need to dramatically ramp that up so that you can actually store energy across not just a sunless night or a windless week, but basically over seasons. And that's going to take a lot more. So we're not very close to this, but we should certainly try to become much, much closer to it.
Is the battery technology moving at that kind of clip? Again, I'm just going from the basic electric airplane model from 1999 to 2000 to today, where it's now totally feasible in a 15 or 20 year span. Do you think we're going to progress that quickly over the next 15 or 20 years as well?
Again, I'm not a material scientist, so I just rely on people who tell us we're going to do much better. But even if we do much better, we will still have a very, very long way to go. So batteries are still going to be much, much lacking behind actually being able to have a totally solar and wind powered society, which is why we really need breakthroughs. So it's not just about making the ion battery, lithium ion battery, cheaper and more effective. It really is about finding a different way to do this. And again, who knows? I think if you look at any one technology, it is very unlikely that we can just throw a lot of money at it and get it. But the point is, if we look at 100 different technologies and throw money at it, and because you need to throw fairly little money at each one of them, we just need one of them to come through. And that's the real trick, to realize this is not ridiculous if you just try to do it across a wide range of areas. But we need to not get wedded to this one technology. One of the things I think is really bad in the whole climate conversation is everyone has their own favorite technology. You know, then it was hydrogen. Very often it'll just be solar and wind, and that's the only thing that you can talk about. There's lots of different technologies. Let's try all of them and see which one works best.
Do the AOCs or the Greta Thunbergs of the world, or many, many others. I mean, I think there used to be, and you would know better than I, but I think maybe it was the Los Angeles Times. That's the biggest newspaper in Los Angeles, the newspaper record where I live and grew up. They said, we're not going to print any articles that disagree with basically what Al Gore and Greta Thunberg and AOC are saying. Like, if you have a thought that differs from our thought in terms of global warming, we won't recognize you. That seems insane for a newspaper that labeled people like you dangerous. Is that still in effect? And how is it for you, who sort of lived in the middle of this for such a long period of time? Do you feel as unwelcome in that community as you ever did, or do you feel like in many? I'll keep going for a second here and tell you what's going on in the United States is we have editors from the New York Times resigning. We have folks in positions saying, I'm not going along with this anymore. I'm not going to keep going down this road. We have to be able to have a dialogue. This cancel culture's not, I don't want to be a part of it. I'm a liberal. I didn't get into journalism to cancel people. I got into journalism to hear opposing viewpoints. I know you were sort of a marked man in this community because you disagreed with the status quo, which was doom and gloom. Have you felt the winds change at all, or are you still a pariah?
I'm certainly somewhat of a pariah. I think I'm less so because I'm not actually disagreeing with the UN climate panel. I'm using their numbers. But as you point out, it's not just about that. It's also that my points are inconvenient. They're uncomfortable. This is not what we usually want to hear, kind of thing. It doesn't support the easy new Green New Deal. So what I've found is that, and that's reflective of what you just said, that in the US, it has become increasingly hard to have anything but the same viewpoint represented over and over again. So I used to be able to write easily in the Washington Post or New York Times, and that's become harder and harder, not because I've changed, but simply because they have become more isolated as I see it. That is a shame for everyone, because at the end of the day, this has to be about how do we do smart policy based on reasonable analysis? And that's what I try to present with my book. And I think that's what most people want to hear about. So in that sense, it's become harder, but it's not impossible. And, we still do some things with the Los Angeles Times, and we try to get out in all these areas. And I think there's some sense in which people recognize, look, we're trying to solve a really big problem. Maybe we shouldn't shut out all the people who doesn't say there's just this one thing that works. Because just remember this, for the last 30 years, we've been trying one way of trying to fix climate change, which is, if you will, a little bit the Al Gore approach. We promise lots of stuff, and then we mostly don't do it. And not surprisingly, that hasn't worked. And I'm surprised that people who are really, really worried about global warming say, let's keep doing that. I would suggest that if it hasn't worked for the last 30 years, maybe we should try and find another and better policy. That is one that is not going to cost us much, that will have much greater chance of working, and that will have a much greater opportunity to actually fix climate change. And that is, as we talked about the whole time, technology. Invest dramatically more in technology. And if you saw what Biden just came out with his $2 trillion plan, lots of things that are really questionable, and I think a lot of them are just going to lose money. But he did do one thing. He also said, let's invest a lot more money in green R&D, and that is wonderful. So at least there's some push in the right direction.
Last couple of questions, because I know it's at midnight where you are, and so a couple things. You brought up Inconvenient Truth and Al Gore. That movie is 15 years, 18 years. How old is that movie? 15 years old now?
14, yeah.
And many of the prognostications didn't come to fruition, or not? I really haven't studied it.
Well, I mean, he didn't make all that many short-term predictions, so it's hard to say that. But he certainly made a lot of exaggerations, and he did say, in combination with his movie, I believe in 2007, that if we haven't fixed climate change in the next 10 years, it's going to be too late. So that was 2017, and clearly it isn't. Again, it shows a little bit the problem of making these promises. The next 10 years, or we're all going to be doomed. Well, no.
A lot of smart people I've spoken to, including yourself, seem to, and his history has bore this out. Technology, we're pretty good at fixing things with technology, even if we don't know what it is now. Again, like we didn't know what a catalytic converter was in 1956, but we've done a pretty damn good job at fixing things. I mean, look at medicine, for the love of Christ. Like, we are pretty good at fixing problems, even problems we create with technology. And I think it's safe to say that you believe we'll go down that same path as it pertains to the environment.
I think it's the only way that we can go down. Whether we actually choose that is obviously up to us. I think there's both a risk that we're going to spend all of our money on subsidizing existing inefficient solar and wind, feel good about it, and actually not fix climate change. I also think there's a big risk that we're not going to spend very much on research and development. Then, of course, we're not going to get many innovations. So we really need to get people back to realizing The only way you can fix this in the long run is by dramatically increasing investment in green energy R&D.
Last question. I know you're a nice guy, but how much of this feels like folks in charge wanting to tell you what to do? A lot of this feels a little bit punitive or something. Like it's almost as like they're partially interested in the environment and wholly interested in sort of dictating your life to you. That's kind of what it smacks of to me. Do you feel there's a strong element of that?
I certainly think there's a strong element of something else. When you look at politicians, I mean, yes, they like to fix the planet and their country and do good and all that stuff, but mostly they want to get reelected. And one of the ways that we have shown throughout time is for a politician to be able to say, you are doomed. You are going down the drain, but I can save you. Vote for me and I will save you. And climate change gives you the extreme opportunity to do that. Not only to actually say, I'm going to save you, vote for me, but also I'm going to save you and the costs are going to come in the next election cycle. That's the perfect setup for politicians. So I think a lot of politicians more or less have just simply jumped on this because it's such an easy thing to say. So all these terrible things, I can save you, vote for me. And I think that's what politicians are doing. And in that sense, of course, it's not very helpful because they're basically saying, vote for me to spend your money badly so that we can talk about this next election cycle as well.
Well, Bjorn Lomborg, are you false alarm, by the way, how climate change panic costs us trillions, hurts the poor, and fails to fix the planet? Is this book being reviewed? Is it going to get up at the New York Times bestseller list? I've noticed, believe me, I'm in the business of saying things that are unpopular as well. And there's two modes I've noticed. It's either they attack you or they shun you. So it's either they attack you for what you're saying or they just pretend like you were never born, like as if you never came out with a book or came out with a movie. There's no reviews. There's no discussion. Usually it's a compliment when they just ignore you because that means you're right and they don't want to have to deal with you or your product is good. But is this thing being reviewed? Is it going to get on the New York Times bestseller list? Is the LA Times going to review this book? Well, they certainly should, and you should tell them. So, New York Times actually just came out with a review, a scathing review. What?
So, in some sense, I guess I should be pleased that they actually bothered to review the book. They asked George Stiglitz to review it, and they honestly admitted on Twitter that they asked him, and he said, "Yes, I'll review it, but I'm going to give it a terrible review." Before he read it. And it seems like he never really bothered to read very much of it. So he basically just enforced the standard view. He said a lot of wrong things. He told us that Wall Street is going to be flooded by 2100, forgetting that it's already flooded today, as in flooded. But of course, the pedestrians that walk around there don't actually need scuba gear because technology saves Wall Street and will also, of course, save Wall Street in 2100. So, there is these kinds of reviews. There is also some great reviews out there, but yes, there are definitely some people who would like to silence this book.
Do you notice the theme with the bad review from the New York Times is they give the book a bad review, but they don't refute the technology or don't refute the information that's in it? I've noticed they say it's a bad book, and then you go, all right, tell me everything I got wrong, and they don't address that. They just say you got it wrong.
They go even further. They say it's a dangerous book.
All right.
And then you know where they're headed. And also curiously, they mostly pan me for using the Nobel laureate who actually won the Nobel Prize in climate economics for saying stuff that's inconvenient. Well, there you go. I tend to think that the guy who actually got the Nobel Prize for talking about it probably knows his stuff and probably has a point and certainly should be heard and certainly shouldn't be silenced in the New York Times. But look, they're not going to silence this. And what they're actually saying is this is dangerous because if we start this conversation, we're not going to have an easy journey with the new Green Deal. And of course, at the end of the day, if you want to spend a lot of money, you don't want that to be too scrutinized. But I would tend to say, if you're going to spend trillions of my dollars, I want to have a say, and I want to notice that all of that money is spent well.
Well, keep on doing the Lord's work, even though you're probably an atheist.
Or at least not that religious, right? I mean, in Scandinavia,
vegetarian. I know where you guys. I know how you guys roll. Bjorn Lomborg, thank you for joining us once again. Get some sleep.
Wonderful to be on your show.
Thanks for staying up late. And again, the book, False Alarm. You get it. You read it. You decide. Available on Amazon as we speak. Thank you, Bjorn. All right, let me hit Simply Safe up here first. Number one sign of a bad home security system. It's complicated, and you never use it. Simply Safe. Well, it's simple and it's faster. Designed to be easy to use while protecting your whole home 24/7. Order online, open the box, place the sensors, plug it in. No technician or salesperson will come to disrupt your house. No outrageous monthly fees or long-term contracts. We use it here. I've always used these guys. It's up and running in under an hour. Peel and stick. The sensors are small. You don't even really see them. I mean, it looks like the ones that are hardwired. And you don't have to drill. You don't have to pull wires. Batteries last up to 10 years. There's some battery technology for you. Just take the home unit, you plug it in. Named the best overall home security of 2020 by U.S. and World Report. Right, Dawson?
Head to simplysafe.com/Adam and get a free HD camera for our listeners. That's simplysafe.com/Adam to make sure they know that our show sent you.
All right. Put the plugs up, Mexipata, please. Good Sports is coming up next, and you can go to adamcarolla.com for all your live shows, and you can get my book, I'm Your Emotional Support Animal. That's up and running on Amazon. Get Bjorn's book, then go ahead and get my book. Live shows coming up, Addison, Texas, I think the 24th, 25th, or something like that. Then back to Texas again for some other date somewhere, sometime. San Antonio coming up July 31st through August 1st, and Addison Improv July 24th, 25th. Tempe coming up. Go to adamcarolla.com, find all the live shows. Till next time, Adam Carolla for Gina Grad and Paul Bryan and Bjorn Lomborg saying mahalo.
Stick around.